So Hailie Deegan parting ways with AM Racing. You kind of saw this coming with Joey Logano running her car this past weekend at Chicago. Obviously wasn't doing well, 28th in the standings. And I think there was this thought because she was in trucks. And look, it seems like everybody just cleans everybody out in the truck series. And she was getting cleaned out a lot. And I think there was
Yeah.
this thought that when she moved up to Xfinity, there's a little more racing. Maybe she would do better. That has not been the case. I believe she's 22 years old. So, what do you think about her situation and potentially what's next for Hailie Deegan?
A couple things about that, Charlie. Number one, I'm just not one that blindly goes along with the saying, well, they were moved up too quick or they were put in this position too quick. I in some cases, yeah. Some cases, yeah. I think it really goes back to the amount of talent you got. It's like in her case, maybe she's thrown in there too quick. Maybe she should have spent more time down. But a lot of times you don't develop the driver technique. You've got a technique that you've got to develop because you're with a lesser quality of driver. Okay, and when you move up, each time you move up in our sport, no matter where it is, you get into a better quality of driver that you have to compete against, and by competing against, you also learn those guys. So in her case, it could be. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe totally she moved up too quick. Maybe that is it. I don't know. But I just have trouble every time I hear that driver was moved up too quickly. Yeah, because in my mind, I think if you're really talented and you've got it and you're smart, okay, and you study your trade, you're going to show. Even though overall you're going to have problems, you're going to show glimpses of, look at here, man. Look what that car is doing. Where'd they come from? Right? It might be lap 112. You know what I mean? Or on a certain run or a certain segment. But all of a sudden there's Hailie Deegan or whatever. They're leading, right? Or they're battling for the lead, right? And at the end of the day, they might finish 20th, but you'll see glimpses. You'll see glimpses of these things. Now, that's part one. Part two is not really to Hailie, but basically female drivers in our sport. There is no doubt in my mind, and I have said this for years, and I know everybody else knows this, and that's one of the reasons they gravitate towards these guys. The first time the first lady comes along, female, that becomes a prolific winner in our sport, a possible champion, you are setting on an absolute gold mine, folks. I mean a gold mine. That particular driver person, the team owner, the team that invested in that person, the people that got behind them, it'd be like mining for gold, man, and all of a sudden you hit the big mother lode worth billions, right? It's the same way. It's the same way with a female driver. And to this point, that hasn't happened, right? Will it ever happen? Hell, I don't know. I mean, I look back, golly, in my career, back in the Bush days, Elton Sawyer's wife, Patty Louise, she came along. She did an admirable job in the Bush series. Gosh, if we go back to Janet Guthrie, and even Louise Smith, was that her name in the 50s, the first female driver, I think, and all through the years. And then I look at all these drivers, Wally Dallenbach's wife, Robin, there's so many of these guys, and probably one of the best that I ever drove against or competed against was Shauna Robinson. I don't know if you remember that name, Shauna Robinson. She's still around. She's fighting some health issues now, but she was a very extremely talented race car driver, and for whatever reasons it didn't happen. Then probably the most well-known, prolific, of course, has been Danica Patrick, and she came along and she was very marketable. Everybody in the world knew that name, and she brought GoDaddy, and she brought money into our sport. She had a team. I mean, brought money that fed crew guys for a number of years with that team she's with, and that worked. But the problem is she didn't. She wasn't competitive. It wasn't from a lack of trying. I know I didn't know Danica. That spoke to her a couple of times, but I knew the guys that worked with her. They all said she had the desire and the want to and the work ethic to make it happen. But, for whatever reasons, it didn't happen. So, the deal with Hailie, yeah, she's the next next young female star that we're going to promote and try to make happen. And guess what, Charlie? It didn't happen. Or to this point, it hasn't happened. Not saying it's over for her. I mean, hopefully she'll be the next big deal, right? But so far, it hadn't happened.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with her as well is, look, she is so marketable. You have her dad,
Yeah,
Brian Danger Deegan, going back to the X Games. Look, she's a very attractive young woman. She has a huge following
yeah,
here on YouTube. She brings sponsors. You have Monster Energy and all that. And we all know, look, there are some male drivers who maybe have their rides because they can be attached to money and
right.
sponsors and all that. And maybe they're not one of the top 36 or 40 drivers that should be in Cup or Xfinity or whatever it is. So I guess my question is kind of, even if you're acknowledging that she's not ready yet, right? That she's not there yet. I do think there's an interesting balance in what she brings to the sport in terms of eyeballs and maybe young girls and her YouTube following. I would think even if she's not running up front, it's definitely good for the sport if she's in it. And I would
Yeah,
think NASCAR would want to keep her in it.
I agree. The marketability of what she brings. I mean, you hit on the points that makes her viable. It makes some of these people like her viable, right? I mean, the all the points you just made are very valid points, and we need that. We use that. We can use that to our advantage, and yeah, there's no doubt. But the downside is there are people then that within the sport are like, well, she's taking money away from somebody that could really shine with it, right? And I know I remember back. I go back a little bit to the Bush days, and I mentioned Patty McWeeks a while ago. Patty McWeeks was very heavily promoted by different factions in our sport. One being Buick, all right, Buick Automotive Division, and Buick. She was on a Buick deal, and they supplied a lot of stuff for her career. And she had done rail and road racing. Well, what ended up happening with Patty? A lot of folks, there was animosity in the garage area because they're looking at Patty and saying, well, man, she's got that Buick deal going, right? Gets free motors and all the stuff she gets. That could be going to somebody that could be going to me, right? Not me personally, Rick, but I'm just saying that was kind of the mindset that some of the folks I remember had, and they're like, animosity, dude, jealousy, right? She's taking money that could be used for actually winning races, right? Well, yeah, but our sport is our sport. It's a little bit more than just winning races. It's a marketability. It's the fans, the involvement, and you're exactly right. Hailie and her background and her looks and the whole deal. Hopefully she'll get a shot and stay at this thing a little while, because there's no doubt Danica Patrick brought value. There's absolutely no doubt she did that. But the core of our sport is racing. The core of racing is winning. All right. And I think when you lose sight of that and you start thinking about other things that bring value, then I think it starts taking away a little bit from our sport and what our core values are, right? Not to be taken away from what they bring and what they do. Danica, Hailie, and all those guys. And I get it. I understand that. But still, you've got to be a race car driver first, right? I mean, it's kind of like, I don't care if you're a black race car driver, right? You're not to succeed and to do well. You're not a black race car driver. You're a race car driver that happens to be black, right? And if you stick to that core part, man, if you become successful, you just explode as a personality, right? And because you're back to the core of what our sport is, and that's racing and winning. Although, I get it. I get the marketability side and what it brings. Totally with you on that, Charlie. But we cannot ever lose sight of the fact of what we do and what it's about. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That
Okay.
was
All right.
very, very
Okay.
well said. Good
All right.
stuff.